the coagulometer will tell you that APTT is this much. But if you actually go to that particular time, then it will tell you, then you can ask it to show you the curve. Then you can see the curve. So APTT is timed here. At the same time, you must realize that there is a slope. The slope is actually the velocity of the clotting process. It tells you the rate at which the clot is formed, and the degree by which the turning happens is actually the acceleration of the clotting process. So if I show you some examples, here you can see the thromboelastogram almost is like the half of the curves. So now you must realize that there are a lot of tests that are likely to come up which are called as global hemostasis tests because the physiology of coagulation is changing. So the global hemostasis tests are those tests that reflect global hemostasis like thrombin generation test, thromboelastogram, and clot waveform analysis. And they have, as I showed you, they have shown linearity to their measures with factor VIII levels in spike samples at low factor levels. There is limited data on such responses in non-spike samples, that is clinical samples, and people are looking at various data coming from various centers to see the impact of this test. So far, this game has been going on for the last 8 years, and nothing significant has come, mainly because when you try to take the test closer to physiology, you are actually compromising on the reproducibility of the test, because you made this test so sensitive that slight variables can affect the test. So when I also got into this game, I realized that it's so many big players are playing and nothing has come out. So I started looking at the story of PT and APTT, how Quick played around with prothrombin time and how Brinkhouse played around with APTT. And I realized that they also knew physiology and they also wanted tests to be closer to physiology, but reproducibility was a huge issue. And they improved the reproducibility of the test by making the test lesser and lesser and lesser sensitive. So I think probably the new generation is also going to go through that game again. So now, if you look at the phenotypic heterogeneity in patients, you can see with severe hemophilias, you have got phenotypic heterogeneity. So how can you use the data that is coming from clot curve analysis for phenotypic heterogeneity? And we know that phenotypic heterogeneity is being identified clinically. Can the lab identify this among hemophilics? So it's been suggested that global hemostasis tests may reflect phenotypic heterogeneity better than any other platform, TGT, ROTEM, or TEG. So clot waveform analysis, what do we measure for quantifying thrombin? So if you look at the earlier graph that I showed you, that is a clot curve. As I said, the APTT is here, initiation is here, slope is the velocity, and acceleration is the sharpness with which the thrombin is produced. So you can use mathematical calculation by doing the first derivative. When you do the first derivative, you can actually find the velocity. The peak of the first derivative is the velocity, which is based on the amount of light scatter per second. And then you can use the second derivative, which basically is the pink curve, and the maximum of the second derivative will tell you the acceleration at which the clotting process happens. And now most of the coagulometers have these parameters reflecting the velocity as well as the acceleration. So let's look at some, this was in some of those coagulometers which have got transmittance. So this is the other one, and this is the transmittance. So now I've got a pooled normal plasma, which is the first graph, and then you have got 5 patients with severe hemophilia, all of them with severe hemophilia less than 1%, variable timings of APTT. At the same time, if you look at the clot curve, they are widely variable. Now, I can look at probably the first one, patient 1, I can say that, yes, he has got severe hemophilia, but probably he may be not a bleeder. And yes, he was not a bleeder. But, you know, how many times will you go and sit in front of the clot curve and say that, oh, look at the shape. It's probably, the shape is quite good. Probably this guy is not a bleeder. So can we have more objectivity to such subjective observations? Is that then you start applying the clot curve analysis, the mathematical calculation. And if you see that the acceleration parameter that we apply to these clot curves, if you look at the PNP, the pooled normal plasma, the acceleration or the maximum of second derivative was 12.73. And if you look at the curve which was the sluggish, most sluggish, the acceleration degree is only 0.37 compared to the patient 1, which is 2.25. So now we have got a subjectivity telling that the acceleration in this patient is much better when the clot starts forming. And that's why probably the reason why these patients are less symptomatic. This was actually first described in a paper by Midori Shima in 2002 in Thrombosis and Hemostasis, where he published this in MDA. Unfortunately, MDA doesn't exist anymore by Organon Technica. and he identified these patients who have got a sharper curve like case 4 were not symptomatic at all, though their APTT seconds was quite high. So can CS2000 quantify thrombin? When I'm talking now, probably 1 month later I may be giving a different language, because the CS2000 has now changed the software only about 3 days back in my lab, whereby it is what I'm going to tell you is actually happening on the CS2000. So probably if you see me in a forum on coagulation 1 month or 2 months later, I may probably come out with better data. So now if you buy a Sysmex coagulometer and they'll tell you what is the method of clot detection, they'll say photo-optical or light scatter, and they say that it will be detected at 50% of the clot formation. Now, to a person who understands thrombin generation, it's very difficult to understand what is 50%, because we know that thrombin is still being formed as the clot is being formed. So if you say that this is the 100%, no, this is not the 100%. Thrombin is still being formed. So then the Sysmex people will tell you, no, it's actually not 50%. It's actually the peak, the deepest point of the first derivative. So that means the machine, by its algorithm, is doing a first derivative, and the deepest point of the first derivative is actually your clotting time, and it's not 50%, though it may be closer to the 50%, but it's not 50%. It's actually a mathematical derivative of the clotting time. It is not just arbitrary 50%. So that is a good information. That machine actually uses an arithmetical calculation to give you the clotting time. So, for example, here you have a patient who has got a thromboelastogram. This is from a patient who is very hypercoagulable. So that means, you test his blood. If he is stimulated by any chance, there's a good chance that he will produce a thrombus. So these are other patients who have got a very sharp thromboelastogram. This is hypercoagulable state compared to a normal person. So if suppose I have this coagulometers which gives you the deepest point of the first derivative, if a person is hypercoagulable, probably the deepest point of the first derivative may be much higher compared to the normal. And if suppose it is very subtle and visually I can't see it, what I can do is I can use a multiple wavelength, and I can ask the machine to do the clot curve at 800, where at 800, when it's supposed to be slightly sluggish, it will be very sharp, and probably it will discriminate easily between a normal control and a sharper one. So hypercoagulable plasma, if I find, what will be the information to the patient or to the clinician? Okay, this guy is hypercoagulable. You did the test, you stimulated the plasma to clot. Fine, the patient is not stimulated. So we can probably, if you try to stimulate this patient, he may produce a clot. Stimulate means you put a needle or you try to start a line. There is a small chance that you can activate coagulation. Now, can I give an additional information that probably this patient at this moment may be producing a clot because he's hypercoagulable? So actually, if I have this information of a very deep point of the first derivative, I may actually order a test called D-dimer. And if the D-dimer is more than 500, there's a good chance that that guy may be actually producing a clot. And we have actually had patients whom we have caught them as the clot process was forming and informed the clinicians that this guy may either land up in casualty with pulmonary embolism or deep vein thrombosis. So that is a good reflex test to give an additional information to the clinician that this patient is hypercoagulable and probably he's clotting now. So this is what I said, that use the 800 nanometers and improve the discrimination between those two curves. The other advantage of looking at the clot curve is that you may be able to identify what is known as a biphasic clot curve. You can see that the clot curve, though supposed to be like this, you can see a biphasic clot curve. That's a biphasic clot curve. It's probably one of the earliest indicators of DIC, much earlier than procalcitonin levels changing, much earlier than any other parameter in DIC and sepsis. And this is called a late biphasic waveform because there is something called an early biphasic waveform. So if a patient on whom you're doing PT and APTT, and the PT and APTT does a biphasic waveform, and you can see the biphasic waveform, even if the time is not prolonged, however, if it's prolonged, it's good because you can have an answer, and the answer is this. The early biphasic waveform always indicates the presence of lupus anticoagulant, all the time. So if you have got a prolonged time of APTT or a PT which has got a early biphasic waveform, it is lupus anticoagulant, the cause for that. Of course, you'll have to confirm it by doing a DRVV test or lupus anticoagulant test, but at least the coagulometer warns you that there is possibility of a lupus anticoagulant being present. This pattern can also be seen when the PT or APDT may be normal, because the lupus anticoagulant may not be sensitive to them, but this pattern can be seen. So you can actually warn the clinician that it's a good idea that patient goes in for a lupus anticoagulant confirmation. And the machine can also flag the system, because the machine also, when it does the first derivative, the biphasic waveform is reflected as a double derivative. So this is a biphasic first derivative. So the machine detects that and actually can flag you that most likely this patient is likely to have lupus anticoagulant. So assays for von Willebrand's factor, you have the von Willebrand's antigen and activity assays like ressuscitin cofactors. By ressuscitin cofactor assay is mostly done manually, but there are systems where you can do it on aggregometry. Slowly, coagulometers are also looking at doing ressuscitin cofactor assay, which is the platelet-based assay. So the first time that we did the automated ressuscitin cofactor assay on a coagulometer was ACL 10,000, and this was published in 2005. The advantage of doing the ressuscitin cofactor on an automated platform is that in an aggregometer, you need 450 microliters of the platelets, but in a coagulometer, you need only 120. So from one set of platelets that you need for aggregometer, you can do 3 patients ressuscitin cofactor assay, bringing down the cost significantly. So for me, the cost of platelet, ressuscitin, and consumables for ressuscitin cofactor assay is only US $260, because I started automating on the, and the ressuscitin cofactor assay actually correlates very well with antigen as well as the regular methods by aggregometry. The advantage of CS2000 is that it has also got an aggregometry platform. It has got a cuvette where, like aggregometer, it has got a stirrer position and 4 channels which can look at the changes in reaction. And if you look at the platelet reactions, you can see that it almost looks like an aggregometer. And at 800 nanometers, the discrimination is much better for an abnormal von Willebrand's factor compared to the normal plasma. So you can see the discrimination is much better. So therefore, they decided that 800 nanometers may be a good place to look for ressuscitin cofactor assay. And they also have the advantage that the stirrer speed is changed from a lag phase to the reaction phase, thereby enhancing the rate of reaction and also the lowest limit of detection. So usually the problem with ressuscitin cofactor assay is below 12 to 15, the lowest limit of detection is reached, and even if you have a lower level, you will still get the same value. So advantage of the lag phase is that you can bring down the lowest limit of detection to almost less than 5. And this is the CV within the run, and this is one of the, this is of course our graph. This is